Good morning, Facebook Live. This is Robin Kirby Gatto. We are doing the next part of sourdough. So I've got my bread covered. And FYI, after this broadcast, I'm going to do the Hanukkah teaching. So you can join in on all that as well. But here's this sourdough loaf that's been in the refrigerator overnight. I'm going to get to it in a minute, but before I get to it, I just want to bring a refresher for those of y'all who are making sourdough and watching my bread broadcast. Hey, Dina, God bless you. Thank you for joining in. And so we're looking at the way to make sourdough. I've talked about a starter. And so you start with a starter. If it's a new starter, and watch that video, you need to feed it for 10 days. After feeding it for 10 days, what's feeding? Flour and water. You put flour and water in it. Good morning, Dina. You put flour and water in it, and I do like 3 tablespoons of flour, and I just mix enough water to where it's pancake batter texture. And so you feed it for 10 days straight so it gets enough strength. And the water test yesterday was to float. I put for a small loaf 2.5 cups of flour, and I put 1 3/8 of water in it. I think that's it. I'll get back to make sure that that's right. And so 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Mix it up. It's sticky. And then you're going to start folding. After 30 minutes, you do your first fold. After another 30 minutes, do a second fold. After another 30 minutes, do a third fold. And then finally do a fourth fold at about 2 hours. And so if you're taking it out of the refrigerator in the morning, you can get it when you wake up. Take it out first thing. At about an hour, hour and a half after it's about room temperature, go ahead and feed it and wait about 6 to 8 hours. Let that feed, that yeast rise, and then start your mixture. And then you're going to do folds, 4 of them in 2 hours time. And then you're going to let it rise for about 8 hours or so. So if you want to do it mid-morning and let it rise overnight, I've done that. But it's so cold right now that I have to let my bread rise in the daytime when the heat is up. So I've got this vintage from eBay, old mid-century Denmark cast iron Dutch oven at a phenomenal price. Here's the top. And I just love European mid-century modern cookware. It is phenomenal. eBay, Poshmark, Etsy. You can get a great price. And like I mentioned, those over there, I have Dansk. All of those are from 1930s to 1950s and 60s mainly. And then I've got some cookware from Italy that I use right over here, the red set, that I do a lot of cooking with, pastas and soups and sauces and the like. But Dutch oven, now I've got a silicone sheet. And I love this one because it says, I judge a restaurant by the bread and by the coffee, Burt Lancaster. And Miss Piggy, never eat more than you can lift. And so this is a really easy lift. Now, just to let you know, I also use paper in relation to cookware. And so when we look at this particular parchment paper, I'm going to show you eventually what I'm going to do, but if this is bigger, listen, the bread will stick to the pot. If you don't have a silicone sheet, for sure, use parchment paper. And even with a silicone sheet, I use parchment paper around the bread so it doesn't stick to the sides, because this bread will stick to the pot and you want to make sure that it's not going to touch the pot. And so I also have what's called a lame. And that is how you can etch into the bread. But I just use this paring knife that's really, really sharp. And it makes it easy. Let me show you. I just use this knife right here because it's really, really sharp. You're going to want to score it just a little bit because it's going to burst. And just to let you know, I do it at 450 degrees for this small loaf. And even with a regular size loaf that's a little bit bigger, I still do it at 450. And I do them both at 55 minutes. The only difference is a much bigger loaf I leave uncovered for another 10 minutes. So this loaf, I'm not going to start the oven until I put it in. Why? It's called a cold start. And a cold start allows the bread to rise a second time in the oven. So it's going to get another rise. And that I really, really like. I've done it both ways, where you preheat the oven and you do it less time. But I just really like doing a cold start to get that second rise. So I'm going to take the bread, and you see how it fills this loaf pan? That turned out really good. I'm definitely going to need, if you look inside this pot, I'm definitely going to need to put parchment paper around it because it will stick to the sides, and I don't want it sticking to the sides. But I like putting my loaf in first, and then I work my parchment paper. So look how beautiful that is. Is that not gorgeous? I'm going to put it down. And like I said, I'm going to put parchment paper around it. This is just to I'll just lift it up so you can kind of see. I'm going to put parchment paper around it because I know it will stick to the sides because it's going to get really big compared to what it is now. And so before I score it with a knife, I'm just going to put parchment paper. The good thing about a Dutch oven too is when you do it like this, there's going to be a little steam inside of this Dutch oven. You don't need a bread maker. You just need a Dutch oven, and it's awesome. And so I'm going to put this all around the bread to make sure it's not touching the side. So you see how I did that. And then I'm going to score it, and I'm going across 3 times. And so you can kind of see where I went across 3 times. And I'm going to put the top on it. And I'm going to preheat the oven. I preheated the oven to 450, and I'm going to put this in. I'm going to put the timer on for 55 minutes and come back. I'll see you later, and I'll see you soon for the teaching.